Greetings, everyone. Shalom. It's so beautiful to walk this Essene, Nazarene, Ebionite path with y'all. This will just be a brief message about the difference between religion and mysticism. There's a lot of confusion out there. And most folks that walk a mystical path think that religion is largely worthless, or is perhaps based on superstition and myth and all of that. Likewise, many religious people think that mysticism is worthless, and that it is a useless endeavor, a waste of time to attempt to know God or experience God directly. I take a middle ground, a middle approach. I find so much value in both religion and mysticism. And as I write in my book, Yeshua the Anointed One, Pre-Pauline Christianity, I feel like religion without mysticism is largely vapid, hollow, shallow, or superficial. Likewise, mysticism without religion is baseless and dangerous, or at least it can be dangerous. We need both to really be a complete spiritual seeker on this path. It's necessary for us to have both influences in our lives. Religion is largely based on belief and belief systems and belief structures, and rituals and ceremonies and holidays and religious celebrations and communities and all of that. Whereas mysticism is primarily based on our direct experience. So in other words, mystics wish to know God. They wish to experience God directly in their own being, rather than just believe things about God that someone else has said or written down thousands of years ago. I lean a little more in the direction of mysticism. Of course, I think it's far better to know God and experience the divine directly, experience our divine innate nature, our soul, in other words, directly, rather than to simply believe things about the soul or believe things about God. So it's much better to be a knower than it is to be a believer. That doesn't mean that you are arrogant and prideful if you have been blessed enough to have some mystical experiences, some awakening experiences, some enlightenment experiences and all of that. That's not what this is about. It's simply that we wish to know God directly. We wish to experience the divine directly. Now, religion is super important because it creates that foundation for us to build our roof of mysticism upon. So we can think of religion as sort of the foundation of the house and the walls, the structure of the house that we build our mystic path upon. But without that firm foundation, mysticism can become quite problematic, quite dangerous. Because if we don't have the religious background, then there's the opportunity to disobey God's law and to not be moral and ethical. So religion provides the moral and ethical foundation for a mystical path. Without it, mysticism can be highly problematic. Okay? And they go hand in hand. They have a sort of reciprocal, direct, proportionate relationship to one another. The stronger we become in our religious convictions and our moral and ethical actions, the easier it is to have mystical experiences. And the flip side of that is the more mystical experiences we have, the closer we draw to God, to communion with the divine, the easier it is to be moral and ethical. And so I see a lot of folks, religious folks, who have very strong beliefs, but they have difficulty keeping God's law. And the reason they have difficulty keeping God's law is because they haven't had those direct, profound, mystical experiences of the divine. They don't know what they are, in other words, as a soul, as this individualized unit of the divine, a unit of pure, limitless, loving consciousness. That's what the soul is. But if you've never directly experienced that, if you've only read about it or heard about it, then it is harder to embody that divinity in your life and to practice morals and ethics. Morals and ethics become natural for someone who is awake. But for the most part, the more we awaken, the more we commune with the Lord, that divine presence in our contemplative prayer and meditation practices, in all that we do in our daily life, the easier it is to embody the law, the easier it is to follow the law as we purify and awaken and elevate our vibration, our frequency. It becomes much easier to follow God's law. It's just natural. It just comes naturally. You don't even have to think about it. You don't have the angel on one shoulder and the demon on the other shoulder trying to persuade you to behave one way or the other. The more mystical experience you have, the closer you grow toward God, the easier it is to follow God's law. It's just cause and effect. And I find that firm foundation in a religious tradition, in our case, the original authentic Christianity, what some call Jewish Christianity or earliest Christianity, before Paul, pre-Paul, and the religion that was created by the Proto Christian Essenes, and then further developed by the John the Baptist group, and of course Yeshua, the true prophet, the Messiah, and then his followers, like his brother James the Just, who led the original early church, and that group later became known as the Ebionites. If we follow these teachings by reading Q, by reading the Gospel of Thomas, by reading, the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, what verses are left of it, the Epistle of James, the Didache, the recognitions and homilies, the so-called Clementine literature, all these Jewish Christian texts that preserve the original teachings. If we follow these teachings and these moral and ethical codes, our mystical experiences become easier to have. And so these two we can think of as two wings of a bird. They're two sides of a coin. They go hand in hand. And they have a reciprocal relationship with one another, a direct, proportionate relationship. So we need both. And there are many dangers for mystics who don't have that firm religious foundation. They're not rooted in anything. So they just sort of blow around to and fro in the wind and let their fancies carry them away without being rooted in anything. And so this online ministry is all about restoring the original Christian tradition and exploring our relationship with the divine through our mystical practices. And so if you follow these things, if you fast regularly, if you do ritual baptismal purification in the living waters regularly, you eat a clean vegetarian diet, you get plenty of exercise, you practice contemplative prayer or whatever meditation practice you prefer every day, you read the sacred scriptures. If you do all of these things, you will have that moral, ethical foundation. You'll be purifying yourself and getting yourself ready to have these profound, ecstatic experiences with the Lord. Many blessings. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Lots of love.